The most expensive mistake a police officer can make isn't arresting the wrong person. It's believing the wrong person has no rights. 8 months after an ordinary Tuesday morning at a neighborhood bus stop, former Officer Daniel Mercer sat beneath the bright lights of a federal hearing room, wearing a gray suit instead of a uniform, his badge gone, his confidence stripped away by questions he could no longer outrun. Across from him, attorneys quietly arranged binders thicker than phone books, each one filled with reports, photographs, transcripts, and sworn testimony. A single photograph rested on the table directly in front of Mercer. It showed a woman standing beneath a rain-speckled glass bus shelter, her wrists secured behind her back, her expression calm despite the crowd gathering around her. Her name was Maya Ellison. The attorney leading the hearing gently slid the photograph closer. "Officer Mercer," he asked, "when did you first realize the woman you arrested could end your career?" Mercer stared at the picture for several long seconds before answering in a voice barely louder than a whisper. When she stopped trying to prove who she was, the room fell silent. No one interrupted him. No one needed to. Every person inside that hearing room already knew how the story ended. They knew the settlement totaled $4.7 million. They knew careers had collapsed, policies had been rewritten, and old complaints buried for years had suddenly returned to daylight. What they wanted to understand was something far simpler. How had a routine encounter at a city bus stop become one of the most expensive civil rights failures the department had ever faced? To answer that question, you have to return to the beginning, long before lawyers filled courtrooms and reporters crowded courthouse steps. It began on a gray morning in early October as light rain drifted across Jefferson Avenue. Cars rolled through wet intersections, windshield wipers moving in quiet rhythm, while commuters checked their watches and waited for buses that were running several minutes behind schedule. Standing alone beneath the shelter was a woman wearing a navy raincoat, comfortable walking shoes, and carrying an old brown leather briefcase worn smooth by decades of careful use. She looked like someone heading to work. Nothing more, nothing less. She occasionally glanced toward the road, then down at the folded envelope resting inside the briefcase. An envelope she had promised herself she would finally open before the day was over. She never noticed the patrol cruiser turning the corner. She never imagined that within minutes complete strangers would begin recording her with their phones. She never imagined that people who had never spoken a word to her would quietly assume the officer must have had a reason. And she certainly never imagined that one decision made beneath that bus shelter would eventually force an entire city to ask itself a question far more uncomfortable than whether an arrest had been lawful. The real question was why one woman had been treated as suspicious before anyone had bothered to look for the truth. Maya Ellison had never liked official cars. She preferred ordinary sidewalks, ordinary conversations, and ordinary mornings because they reminded her why the law existed in the first place. That Tuesday was supposed to be deeply personal, not historical. Her sedan was sitting at a repair shop across town, leaving the city bus as the simplest way to reach the community center where she planned to speak later that afternoon. Inside her weathered leather briefcase rested a carefully folded speech that had once belonged to her father, Samuel Ellison, a city bus driver who believed every passenger deserved the same respect no matter where they came from or how much money they carried in their wallet. He used to tell her that dignity was free, but too many people acted as though it had a price tag. Maya had carried those words with her through law school, through years inside federal courtrooms, and through every difficult decision she had ever made. As the drizzle continued to fall across Jefferson Avenue, she watched people arrive one by one beneath the glass shelter. A construction worker balancing a large coffee, a young mother helping her son zip up his backpack, an elderly couple quietly discussing a doctor appointment, a college student wearing headphones while reading from a biology textbook. Everyone appeared absorbed in the ordinary rhythm of another weekday morning. Maya appreciated moments like these because they reminded her that justice was never about headlines. It was about protecting people whose names would never appear in one. She checked the time on her watch and smiled faintly. She would arrive with several minutes to spare. The speech inside her briefcase still remained unopened. She had promised herself she would read her father's handwritten notes one last time before stepping onto the stage later that afternoon, but something kept telling her to wait. Perhaps memories deserved the right moment. A city bus rounded the distant intersection before disappearing behind a delivery truck, signaling another short delay. Nobody complained. The rain softened into a light mist, coating the shelter with tiny beads of water that reflected the muted glow of traffic lights. Maya rested one hand on the handle of her briefcase and quietly observed the world around her. Years spent practicing law had taught her to notice details other people overlooked. A cyclist helping an older pedestrian cross the street. A cashier waving to the same regular customer every morning. Small acts of kindness often revealed more about a community than official reports ever could. Her phone vibrated once with a calendar reminder about the afternoon ceremony. She silenced it without looking at the screen. Today was not about titles or recognition. It was about honoring a man who believed that fairness should never depend on appearance, wealth, or circumstance. Across the street, a patrol vehicle slowed briefly before continuing through the intersection. Maya barely noticed it. Police cars passed this route every day. Nothing about the moment seemed unusual. Nothing suggested that within minutes a misunderstanding would begin unfolding in full public view. Around her, strangers continued checking schedules, watching traffic, and waiting for transportation, unaware that this quiet bus stop was about to become the center of a story that would eventually force an entire city to confront not only one officer's choices, but the hidden assumptions that had quietly shaped those choices long before anyone ever stepped beneath that rain-covered shelter. The calm morning shifted so quietly that almost nobody noticed the exact moment everything changed. A man in his early 50s wearing an expensive charcoal overcoat suddenly stopped near the digital bus schedule and began patting every pocket with growing urgency. His breathing quickened as he searched inside his jacket, checked his briefcase twice, and looked beneath the bench before speaking loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "My wallet is gone." Several people instinctively looked around. A young woman offered to help search the sidewalk while the elderly couple stepped aside to give him room. The construction worker suggested he might have left it inside the coffee shop across the street. For a brief moment, the situation remained nothing more than an unfortunate mistake that could happen to anyone. Then the man pulled out his phone and called the police. He explained that he believed someone at the bus stop had taken it, although he admitted he had not actually seen anyone remove it. He described seeing a person standing near the ticket machine only minutes earlier, but his description lacked almost every meaningful detail. He could not remember a face. He could not identify specific clothing beyond a dark raincoat. He could not even say exactly when he had last held the wallet in his hands. Yet by the time the dispatcher ended the call, uncertainty had already begun transforming into suspicion. Maya remained exactly where she had been standing, one hand resting on the handle of her father's worn leather briefcase, while watching the conversation unfold with quiet concern. She understood that losing a wallet could be frightening. Identification, credit cards, family photographs, and pieces of everyday life often disappeared with it. She felt sympathy for the stranger. What she did not realize was that the next few minutes would place her at the center of his uncertainty. Less than 3 minutes later, a marked patrol vehicle eased toward the curb. Officer Daniel Mercer stepped out first, followed by Officer Emily Foster, who carried a small notepad and listened carefully as the caller explained what had happened. Mercer asked several quick questions before scanning the bus stop with deliberate confidence. His eyes moved across the construction worker, past the elderly couple, past the college student, past the young mother comforting her restless son. Finally, they settled on Maya. Nothing about her behavior had changed. She had not attempted to leave. She had not hidden her briefcase. She simply stood beneath the shelter waiting for the delayed bus exactly as she had been doing all morning. Mercer walked directly toward her without first speaking to anyone else. "Good morning, ma'am," he said in a firm but controlled voice. "May I ask what you are doing here today?" Maya answered politely. "Waiting for the number 12 bus." "How long have you been here?" he continued. "About 15 minutes. Did you notice anyone acting suspiciously?" Maya looked around before replying honestly. "No, officer. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the bus." Mercer studied her expression for another moment. "Would you mind showing me some identification?" Maya met his eyes calmly. "Certainly. Before I reach into my briefcase, may I ask whether I am free to leave, or am I being detained?" The question was respectful, measured, and completely without hostility. Even Officer Foster recognized it as a simple request for clarification. But something shifted inside Mercer the instant he heard it. Instead of hearing an ordinary legal question, he heard resistance. Instead of seeing a cooperative commuter, he began seeing someone he believed was trying to control the encounter. And sometimes the most dangerous assumptions are not spoken aloud. They are the ones a person quietly convinces himself are already true. Officer Daniel Mercer did not answer Maya's question immediately. Instead, he studied her face as though the simple request had changed the entire conversation. Around them, the steady rhythm of the morning continued. Cars rolled through the intersection. A city bus passed in the opposite direction. Raindrops collected along the edge of the shelter, roof before falling onto the sidewalk below. To everyone else, it looked like an ordinary police encounter. Only Maya sensed the subtle shift that had just taken place. Mercer folded his arms. "I asked for identification," he said. "That should not be a difficult request." Maya nodded slightly. "It is not difficult, officer. I simply want to understand whether this is a voluntary conversation or a detention. The answer determines how we both proceed." Her tone remained calm, almost conversational. She did not raise her voice. She did not step backward. She did not argue. She simply waited. Officer Emily Foster glanced briefly toward Mercer before looking back at the man who had reported the missing wallet. "Sir," she asked, "can you tell me exactly where you last remember using it?" The man hesitated. I think I paid for coffee across the street. Or maybe parking before that." Foster wrote down the answer. "Do you remember seeing anyone actually take it?" He looked uncomfortable. "No. I just know it disappeared after I came over here." That uncertainty should have widened the investigation. Instead, Mercer narrowed it. His attention never left Maya. "Open your briefcase," he said. Maya kept one hand resting lightly on the worn leather handle. "Officer, on what legal basis are you requesting to search my personal property?" Mercer answered without hesitation. "Because I have reason to investigate a reported theft." Maya spoke with the same measured voice she had used from the beginning. "A reported theft is not the same as evidence connecting me to it." Several people waiting for the bus quietly exchanged glances. The construction worker lowered his coffee. The elderly couple stopped talking. Even the college student removed one earbud, sensing the conversation had become unusually tense. Foster looked toward the digital security camera mounted above the shelter entrance. A small green indicator light confirmed it was recording. "Daniel," she said carefully, "we can also request footage from the transit authority." Mercer barely acknowledged her suggestion. "That can wait." Foster frowned almost imperceptibly. It would have taken only a few minutes to verify who had approached the ticket machine or whether anyone had even handled another person's belongings. Instead, Mercer took one slow step closer to Maya. "If you have nothing to hide," he said, "there should not be any problem showing me what is inside your briefcase." Maya held his gaze without the slightest trace of anger. "Respectfully, officer, constitutional rights do not depend on whether someone appears cooperative. They exist for everyone." The words landed softly, yet they carried enough weight to make the silence beneath the shelter feel even heavier. Mercer interpreted them as defiance. Foster heard them as a reminder of procedure. The bystanders heard them as something else entirely. They heard two people speaking about the law while quietly revealing two completely different ideas of what the law was supposed to protect. Above them, another bus arrival notice flashed across the electronic display. The number 12 was now only 2 minutes away. None of them knew that before those 2 minutes expired, a routine delay would become the turning point in every life standing beneath that rain-covered shelter. Maya slowly released her hand from the handle of the leather briefcase without opening it. Every movement was deliberate, calm, and impossible to mistake for panic. She looked at Officer Mercer with the same steady expression she had carried since the conversation began. "Officer," she said quietly, "I am willing to cooperate within the limits of the law. I do not want this situation to become more complicated than it already is." Mercer answered almost immediately. "Then make it simple. Open the briefcase." For just a brief second, Maya looked toward the digital display announcing that the number 12 bus would arrive in 1 minute. She gave a faint smile that nobody understood. "I was hoping to be on that bus," she said softly. "So was I," Mercer replied. "But here we are." Around them, the small crowd remained unusually silent. Nobody walked away. Nobody interrupted. Even the light rain seemed quieter than before. Officer Emily Foster watched both of them carefully. She had responded to enough calls to recognize that the facts still did not point toward any particular person. The reporting party had never identified Maya. No witness had accused her. No evidence connected her to the missing wallet. Yet the conversation had somehow narrowed until only one person remained under suspicion. Foster looked once more toward the surveillance camera above the shelter, then toward the ticket machine only a few feet away. "Daniel," she said in an even voice, "transit security can pull the camera footage almost immediately. We should preserve it before the next recording cycle." Mercer never turned his head. "We will get to that later." Maya heard every word. She also noticed something else. Foster was trying to slow the situation down, while Mercer was trying to speed it up. Years spent inside courtrooms had taught her that decisions made too quickly often revealed more than decisions made carefully. She reached into the outside pocket of her raincoat instead of the briefcase and removed a folded transit receipt showing the exact time she had purchased her bus fare. "This confirms when I arrived," she explained. "The ticket machine should also have a digital record." Mercer glanced at the receipt, but made no effort to examine it. "That does not answer my question." Maya nodded politely and slipped the receipt back into her pocket. "No," she replied. "It answers a different one." The construction worker quietly exchanged looks with the elderly man standing beside him. Neither spoke, but both had begun noticing the same pattern. Every piece of information that could clarify the situation seemed to be brushed aside. The reporting party suddenly interrupted. "Officer," he said, sounding less certain than before, "maybe I should check my car again. I was in a hurry this morning." Mercer raised one hand without looking away from Maya. "We are handling this now." Those words settled over the bus stop like another layer of rain. Foster lowered her notebook. Something about the encounter no longer felt like a search for missing property. It felt like everyone else had stopped gathering facts while one person had already decided what the facts must be. Maya rested her hand once again on the old leather briefcase that had belonged to her father. Inside were a folded speech, a family photograph, a sealed government envelope, and an identification card that could change the entire conversation within seconds. She could have ended the misunderstanding by opening it immediately. Instead, she looked directly at Mercer and spoke with remarkable calm. "From this moment forward, officer, every decision belongs to you. Please make each one carefully." Mercer believed he was hearing another challenge. In reality, he had just been given one final opportunity to choose a different path before a routine morning became a case that no one in that city would ever forget. The electronic sign flashed once more before changing from 1 minute to arriving. The familiar shape of the number 12 bus appeared through the mist, its headlights cutting softly across the wet pavement as it approached the shelter. For everyone waiting there, it meant the workday was about to begin. For Maya Ellison, it marked the final ordinary second of her morning. Officer Daniel Mercer stepped forward and spoke with unmistakable authority. "Ma'am, I am instructing you to remain here while I continue my investigation." Maya answered without hesitation. "Officer, I have remained here voluntarily from the moment you arrived. I have answered every question you have asked." Mercer nodded once. "Then you can answer one more. Open the briefcase." The bus slowed to a stop only a few yards away. Its doors folded open with a quiet hiss. Several passengers prepared to board, but almost everyone noticed the unusual scene beneath the shelter. The driver, Jonah Reed, looked through the windshield with growing concern before reaching toward the dashboard to ensure the exterior safety cameras continued recording as they always did during passenger loading. Maya glanced briefly toward the open bus doors before returning her attention to Mercer. "I would like to continue on my way," she said calmly. "If I am being detained, please tell me the legal basis for that detention." Mercer interpreted the request as another refusal. "You are interfering with an active investigation," he declared. Officer Emily Foster immediately looked toward him. "Daniel," she said carefully, "we still have not confirmed that any crime occurred here. The reporting party is no longer certain where he lost the wallet." Almost as if on cue, the man who had made the report took 2 uncertain steps forward. "Officer," he admitted, "I keep thinking maybe I left it inside the coffee shop after all. I really cannot be sure." Those words should have changed everything. Instead, Mercer remained focused on Maya. The construction worker frowned. The elderly couple exchanged another worried glance. Even the college student quietly lowered his phone, sensing that something important was unfolding before him. Maya took a slow breath. "Officer Mercer," she said with remarkable composure, "I do not wish to create difficulties for anyone here today. But every action taken by a public official carries legal responsibility. I hope you will consider that before making your next decision." Mercer believed she was attempting to intimidate him. He heard confidence and mistook it for arrogance. He heard knowledge and mistook it for resistance. "I have considered it," he answered. "Please place your briefcase on the bench." Maya complied without argument, carefully setting the worn leather case exactly where he indicated. She kept both hands visible at her sides. Her movements remained steady, respectful, and deliberate. Officer Foster watched the entire exchange with increasing unease. Nothing about Maya's behavior suggested deception. If anything, she appeared more patient than anyone else standing beneath the shelter. The bus driver continued waiting with the doors open longer than normal, uncertain whether to depart or remain. Rain collected along the edge of the shelter roof before falling in slow, steady drops between Maya and the waiting bus. She looked once toward the passengers, then back at Mercer. "Officer," she said quietly, "there is still time to resolve this correctly." Mercer answered with complete certainty. "I already am." Standing only a few feet away, Officer Foster realized the encounter had quietly crossed an invisible line. It was no longer being guided by new facts. It was being carried forward by a decision that had already been made, and everyone present was about to discover just how expensive one unchecked assumption could become. The doors of the number 12 bus remained open, but no one moved. Even the passengers already seated inside had turned toward the shelter, sensing that an ordinary commute had quietly become something far more serious. Maya stood exactly where she had been instructed, her father's leather briefcase resting on the bench beside her. She neither argued nor attempted to leave. Officer Daniel Mercer took another step forward and spoke with complete confidence. "Ma'am, at this point I am placing you under detention pending further investigation." Maya looked directly at him, her expression unchanged. "I understand what you are saying," she replied. "Before you continue, I respectfully ask that every step from this moment forward be fully documented." Mercer touched the camera mounted to the front of his uniform. "It already is." Maya gave a slight nod. "Good. Documentation protects everyone." Officer Emily Foster felt a growing weight settle in her chest. She looked once more toward the reporting party, who now appeared more confused than frightened. "Sir," she asked, "would you please check your coat pockets one more time while we wait?" The man hesitated before reaching into the inside pocket of his overcoat. He searched briefly, then shook his head. Nothing. Foster was not convinced. She noticed the pocket still appeared unusually full, but before she could speak again, Mercer directed his attention back to Maya. "Please place your hands where I can see them." Maya complied immediately. There was no hesitation, no raised voice, no sudden movement. She simply followed the instruction while continuing to speak in the same calm tone that had defined every moment of the encounter. "Officer Mercer, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. I have cooperated with every lawful instruction you have given me. I have remained here voluntarily, answered your questions honestly, and made no attempt to interfere with your investigation." Mercer answered, "That will all be included in the report." Maya's eyes rested on him for a brief moment before she quietly replied, "I sincerely hope it is." The sentence lingered in the damp morning air longer than anyone expected. Jonah Reed, still seated behind the wheel of the bus, glanced toward the timestamp displayed on his onboard camera monitor. Every second was being preserved exactly as it happened. The construction worker quietly whispered to the elderly man beside him, "She has been calm the whole time." The older man simply nodded. Nobody laughed. Nobody shouted. The silence itself had become the loudest voice at the bus stop. Foster stepped closer to Mercer and lowered her voice. "Daniel, transit security, the bus cameras, and the coffee shop all have footage. We should verify everything before taking this any further." Mercer answered without taking his eyes off Maya. "I have enough to proceed." Foster looked at Maya again. She expected frustration, fear, perhaps even anger. Instead, she saw something entirely different. She saw disappointment. Not disappointment for herself, but disappointment that another opportunity to slow down and verify the facts had just been ignored. Maya finally glanced toward the unopened leather briefcase resting on the bench. Inside was the identification card that could instantly explain why she understood every procedural question she had asked. She could reveal it now. She could end the encounter in a matter of seconds. Instead, she made a different choice. She looked back at Mercer and spoke almost gently. There are moments in every public servant's career when a decision becomes larger than the person making it. I believe this is one of those moments. Mercer misunderstood those words exactly as he had misunderstood everything else that morning. He believed she was trying to impress him with legal language. He had no idea she was quietly giving him one final chance to protect not only her rights, but his own future. The rain had almost stopped, leaving only a thin mist drifting across Jefferson Avenue, as though the city itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Officer Daniel Mercer reached toward the worn leather briefcase resting on the bench and slowly opened the brass clasp. Maya made no movement to stop him. She simply stood quietly with her hands visible, her eyes following every decision he chose to make. Inside the briefcase lay no stacks of cash, no stolen wallet, no hidden valuables, only carefully arranged personal belongings that reflected a life built on discipline rather than secrecy. There was the folded speech written years earlier by Samuel Ellison in neat blue ink, a framed family photograph protected inside a clear sleeve, a transit pass, a leather notebook filled with handwritten observations, and a large sealed envelope bearing an official Department of Justice seal. Officer Emily Foster noticed the seal immediately. Her expression changed before she even spoke. "Daniel," she said carefully, "that appears to be federal correspondence." Mercer glanced at the envelope for less than a second before setting it aside. "Sealed mail proves nothing." Foster looked at Maya, expecting some explanation, but Maya remained silent. She neither reached for the envelope nor attempted to identify herself. The construction worker standing nearby quietly whispered, "Why would somebody carrying government documents be standing here waiting for a city bus?" Nobody answered him. Jonah Reed continued watching through the windshield of the bus, while the onboard cameras captured every passing second. Mercer removed a leather card holder from the briefcase and placed it on the bench without opening it. He seemed almost uninterested in learning who its owner actually was. Instead, he continued searching through the remaining contents as though convinced the missing wallet would somehow appear if he looked long enough. Foster stepped closer. "We should identify her before going any further," she suggested. Mercer answered without looking up. "We already know enough." Maya finally spoke, her voice still remarkably composed. "Officer Mercer, there is an important difference between believing you know enough and actually knowing enough." Mercer closed the briefcase and looked directly at her. "You have had every opportunity to explain yourself." Maya gently shook her head. "No, officer. I have had every opportunity to answer your questions. Those are not always the same thing." The distinction settled over the bus stop with surprising weight. Foster understood exactly what Maya meant. Questions asked from a fixed conclusion rarely uncovered new facts. They only searched for confirmation. At that moment, the man who had reported the missing wallet suddenly froze. He reached into the inside lining of his overcoat once more, this time pressing deeper beneath the folded fabric. His eyes widened. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he pulled out a brown leather wallet. Rainwater had darkened one corner, but it was unmistakably his. He stared at it in disbelief before looking toward the officers. I found it," he admitted quietly. "It slipped into the inner pocket somehow. I must have missed it." Complete silence followed. Nobody celebrated. Nobody spoke. Every eye turned toward Officer Mercer. The missing wallet had never been near Maya. It had never left its owner's coat. Foster closed her notebook and released a slow breath she had been holding for several minutes. Maya did not smile. She did not express satisfaction. She simply looked at Mercer with quiet sadness and said, "The facts finally arrived, officer. The only question left is whether they arrived in time." In that single moment, everyone standing beneath the shelter realized the missing wallet had never been the true test of that morning. The real test had been whether patience, evidence, and fairness would be allowed to guide authority before assumptions quietly took their place. SUA Officer Daniel Mercer stood motionless as the owner quietly held up the missing wallet for everyone to see. The explanation was painfully ordinary. It had slipped beneath the inner lining of the coat and remained there the entire time. There had been no thief, no conspiracy, no crime connected to the woman standing beneath the bus shelter. For several long seconds, the only sound came from the engine of the waiting number 12 bus. Officer Emily Foster looked from the recovered wallet to Maya Ellison and finally spoke the words that should have been spoken much earlier. "Ma'am, may I please see your identification?" Maya nodded gently. Of course. She reached into the leather card holder that had rested inside the briefcase all along and removed a government identification credential. Foster accepted it with both hands, reading only the first few lines before her expression changed completely. Her eyes widened, and she immediately looked back at Maya with unmistakable respect. She quietly handed the credential to Mercer. He read the name once. Then he read it again. United States Attorney Maya Ellison. The color slowly disappeared from his face as every conversation from the past several minutes replayed in his mind. Maya carefully closed the briefcase and spoke with the same calm voice she had maintained from the beginning. "Officer,